What's going on, everyone? Lauren Sisler here with AL.com with a Sunday edition of SEC Insider brought to you by Keep Alabama Beautiful. Hey, it's a big Sunday. It's Selection Sunday. The College Football Committee has made up their minds. They have decided who the top 4 teams in the country are. Mike Rodak joins me now to discuss that. And, well, here's the deal. Alabama gets put into the number 1 spot. I don't know if a lot of people were surprised by that. I will get your thoughts on that in a minute. Alabama number 1, Michigan number 2, Georgia number 3, and in that number 4 spot, Cincinnati. So we'll break down those matchups here in just a moment. But first, Alabama knocking off the number 1 team in the country in the SEC championship game, 41-24. And then they knock them off the throne there at the top of the College Football Playoff Committee in their minds as we get ready for the College Football Playoff that is upon us coming up December 31st. So just your thoughts on that performance from Alabama, a career performance from Bryce Young, and really the offensive line stepping up and doing some big things that we didn't see a week ago against Auburn.
Yeah, I would say it was surprising, but not shocking. Like, I came into this game with the thought that, it's easy to say after the fact now, but I did think that Georgia's defense had not been tested nearly the way that it was going to be tested by Alabama's offense, and that Georgia had a schedule that probably was favorable for some of the rankings that it had coming into that game, both defensively and overall being the number 1 team in the country. But Alabama was the best offense that they were going to see. And they're also the best defense that Georgia was going to see. And that was part of the game last night, too. I mean, when the offense in the second half kind of sputtered for Alabama, it was the defense that came up with those turnovers and that big 4th down stop as well. So that was part of the equation. But overall, like, Georgia's defense just hadn't really been tested by an offense like Alabama's. And I think people were getting a little bit carried away by some of the historical talk about what Georgia's defense was and how, it was giving up 6.9 points a game and all that. When you play in Alabama, things are going to be a little bit different. And I think that was expected on my part. I didn't expect the result to be so one-sided. I mean, it wasn't that dramatic of a game. It was a 2-score game for basically the entire second half. And Alabama, I think, as Gary Barta said today, the chairman of the CFP, was basically in control of the game ever since, it was 10-0 Georgia early on. But once Jamison Williams made that big play and Alabama kind of got the ball rolling, it didn't really stop. So, again, I think surprising in the fact that it was a wide margin, but not shocking in the fact that Alabama won this game. I think that was certainly well within the range of outcomes going into it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it. Surprising and shocking, 2 different things. So, I can agree with you on that. And really, Alabama had control of it. And I'll be honest, going into this football game, I thought it was going to be a close game. I thought it was going to be a 1-score game, even a 3-point game. And I really was leaning more towards Georgia, mostly because what we saw from Auburn. I did, though, feel that Alabama came out probably more inspired and probably put some pieces in place in practice and probably made some adjustments and really focused in on some of those things that Nick Saban harps on constantly after that Iron Bowl game. Had they have gone in there and just blown the doors off of Auburn, I don't know if we would have gotten the same result. But I do think Alabama really made those fine-tune adjustments, figured out what they needed to do, and obviously the result showed on the field. Bryce Young, tremendous performance, career performance for him, 26 for 44, 421 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown. Again, they were down 10-0. But even at that point, there was nothing that was telling me like, oh, this game's over. Alabama's going to, get behind the sticks here and it's game over. Alabama just had an answer and then kept answering. So, one key storyline, and obviously something we'll be looking at as they get ready for the college football playoff. John Metchie, one of their star receivers, goes down with a significant knee injury. Nick Saban, just talking after the selection was made, he said that it was a significant knee injury. He did not he did not confirm what that knee injury is, but the thought is it's potentially an ACL, which would obviously knock him out and be quite a road to recovery for the next few months. So very unfortunate for Metchie and the amount of time that he's going to be spending doing that, rehabbing, as someone that likely was going to be heading off to the NFL draft. So you hate to see that. So just the significance of losing him, Mike, in your opinion, and who steps up and who's going to be the guy that's going to need to step up besides Jamison Williams that we'll have to kind of fill that void for these next two games. As Nick Saban calls this, we're in a 2-game season now.
Right. Yeah. And I was listening on my drive back from Atlanta this morning to some of the national radio shows, and it seemed like everybody was kind of mentioning, well, if Georgia plays Alabama again, Alabama won't have John Metchie. And in their words, I think Georgia would win. But keep in mind, there were some of the same predictions when Jalen Waddle went down last year. And that was much earlier in the season.
Yeah,
that was in October.
very true.
I think it was David Pollock with ESPN on College Game Day, saying that it would damage or eliminate or whatever the exact words that he used their national championship hopes. And I didn't really see a huge difference between that Alabama offense with Waddle and without Waddle. Obviously, it kind of put more attention on Devontae Smith, and he certainly delivered. He won a Heisman. And Jameson Williams might not be quite at that level of Devontae Smith and in some of the historical numbers that he put up last year, but he's the best wide receiver in the country. I think right now he's the odds-on favorite to win the Blitnikoff Award as the best receiver. He's one of the 3 finalists for that. And he has the speed where you can put 2 guys on him. Georgia put 2 guys on him, and he still beat both of them. So even if you have the attention on Jameson Williams in these last 2 games, he still has the opportunity to make some plays. And it's just a matter of, who are the other guys. But keep in mind, Alabama's got some talent, as they always do. Like we talked about the same thing last year when they lost the guys that they did. Who's going to be the next up? Well, we found out who was the next up. And in this case, it's just kind of going down the list. You have a 5-star kid who just made some pretty big plays last week against Auburn and Ja'Cory Brooks. You have Trayshawn Holden, who's made a few plays this year. Christian Leary, who's kind of moved to running back, but maybe he gets more time. And then the wild card is JoJo Earl, who was that, in Saban's words, the Waddle-like receiver that they had going into the year. Had the knee injury about a month ago and has been out. However, he was in uniform last night in Atlanta, was wearing a brace over his left knee, looked a little gimpy in warmups. I don't think he actually played. In fact, I'm sure he didn't play. But 3 weeks from now, when they play December 31st in Dallas, he very well might be ready for that game. And that's another dimension to your offense, kind of an east-west guy with a lot of shiftiness and speed himself. So that would be honestly the biggest name I would watch, in addition to Ja'Cory Brooks, to replace John Metchie.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of interesting to see how things shape up there. And, again, John Metchie has been a significant player, but to me, it's not someone that has necessarily been a game changer consistently every single game this season. And so I certainly don't think, as you mentioned, will be a significant drop off, but wishing him all the best in his recovery. I know it's disappointing. He came out of the locker room, tears were in his eyes. I know Jamie Erdahl had mentioned that, being up close and kind of personal with him and being able to see the emotion there. And so, certainly always hard to see with those guys, and especially at this point in their career when they're about to turn the page to a new chapter. So as we wrap up, we got to get to the playoff, right? The big announcement came down today, Alabama #1. I know there was some, thoughts after yesterday and sort of, is the committee going to put Alabama #1 or is it going to be Michigan #1? You knew Georgia was obviously going to drop, and then Cincinnati getting in, obviously, as, a group of 5, the first group of 5 conference team to make the 4-team playoff. And so it's interesting, Alabama making its 7th playoff appearance in 8 years. So pretty impressive there. They'll be going to the Cotton Bowl in Texas to face Cincinnati, who again is #4. That's on December 31st in Arlington. And they, of course, beat Houston in the AAC championship, 13-0 on the season. And then #3, Georgia facing Michigan in the Orange Bowl. And then the winner of those 2 games, obviously, will play for the national championship January 10th. What do you think about these matchups for, Alabama, obviously Georgia, Michigan, and Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, the preferred outcome and the expected outcome. I don't think there was a whole lot of legitimate debate that Michigan was going to be #1. I think Alabama is the way they played against Georgia, put them ahead of Michigan. I think just generally Alabama's analytics going into this game were certainly better than Michigan's as well. When you look at strength of schedule and wins against top 25 teams, all that stuff. So this was the expected outcome. It's the better outcome for Alabama. I don't think you want to see Georgia right away with the tables kind of being turned and Alabama maybe having more confidence and Georgia having a chip on their shoulder. And, this Alabama team has played its best when they are a little bit doubted and behind and all that. So now that the tables have been turned and Alabama's back to being the national championship favorite and #1 seed and all that, you're going to hear a lot from Nick Saban about trying to keep that same mentality that they had. In fact, you already have today, about kind of proving themselves, not just when their back's against the wall, but when they are favored. So that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for Alabama against Cincinnati. Obviously, talent-wise, they certainly have the edge, and Cincinnati's analytics, their strength of schedule being in the 80s, nationally, it's going to be an uphill battle for them. And certainly Alabama's, I think, double-digit favorites on some of the early lines that have come out. So it's one of those games where I think Alabama certainly will have a very good chance to win. And then you just go and see who wins that Michigan-Georgia game, which I think will be the more intriguing of the two, as it usually is for the 2-3 game. And at the end of the day, if you're Alabama, I don't know who you want to see more. It's like you have the confidence that you can beat Georgia because you just did, but Michigan's pretty dangerous too. And they had a pretty close loss to Michigan State for their only loss of the year, and that's a pretty good team too. So yeah, it's a tough call, but at the end of the day, we have a month and a half to talk about it. So
yeah, a whole month and a half, y'all. I know, and it's interesting too, because I'll never forget, just the demeanor and sort of the response from Kirby Smart a few years ago in the national championship game when they had him on the line. Georgia was looking like they were going to pull away and win it, and then of course Tua comes in, makes the big play, and kind of the rest is history. I just kind of remember Kirby's demeanor, and it just takes me back to that, like watching him on the sidelines. Of course, there's a confidence about him certainly, but just thinking like as this game's unfolding, like you're sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, like, okay, we got to play this game. And now if we're going to have a shot at winning a national championship, we're going to have to play this team again, most likely. Right. And, just as a head coach and someone that just, if there's a year that's going to happen, this is the year, and you're right here, you're staring it in the face. And then it's like, oh, so, it just, I don't know. My gears kept grinding last night, just kind of watching that, thinking like, what are you thinking if you're Kirby Smart? And I obviously I didn't see his press conference afterwards, was just curious to kind of know if you got any sort of insight on the demeanor coming from the Georgia sideline.
I didn't see it personally, but I did. They were both on ESPN today after the announcements of the pairings were made.
Yeah, I saw some clips from it. Yeah,
you can just see it in Kirby's face, and then you could just see it in Saban's face too. Just that kind of that smile that he has, that
the little
this is kind of
little grin,
peak Saban, where he can kind of prove to the world what he is and the competitor that he is. And he did it. He definitely did it last night. I mean, it was but as impressive of a Alabama win that I've covered in the 3 years here.
Yeah, you almost want to give, like Nick Saban, give a little wink. That's going to be like his mantra when he goes out. Not that he's going out anytime soon, Alabama fans. Don't worry about that. But give a little wink. We'll see you, kind of thing. Hey, so rat poison. My producer Patrick Greenfield back here, my buddy. He's always keeping us in check. He's been there behind the scenes all season long. Says the rat poison you put out there this week was yummy. So that was a quote from Nick Saban. When did he say that?
Guys,
so it was last night.
Really positive.
All right, here he goes.
Rat poison.
Yeah.
The rat poison that you usually give us is usually fatal. But the rat poison that you put out there this week was yummy.
Oh! That is so funny. So that was this
we'll
morning.
Go over here on the right, in front row.
That was last night. Yeah,
that was last night?
I had asked him about the underdog aspect of the game, and essentially going into the game, Saban said he didn't know how his players would respond to being underdogs, and so I asked him how did they respond, and you can tell he kind of had his answer ready. He essentially said, usually rat poison is all the positive,
right?
Vibes coming towards Alabama. In this case, it was going away from them, and so instead of the rat poison being fatal for them, it was yummy because it obviously fueled his players and gave them the edge that I think, played a pretty big psychological role in this game. So
I like how he said yummy. It's like he was embellishing in that. Like,
oh yeah, he kind of sat back, even when he walked into that press conference, kind of sat down in his chair and crossed his arms and said to us, like, "Oh, how's it going, guys?" I mean, it was just, you could tell from the start that it was Saban was feeling himself a little bit last night.
Which is funny too, because we in the media obviously all have our predictions and our thoughts. And they always preach, coaches always preach, don't be reading all the threads, don't be in the blogs, don't be on Twitter and this and that and the other. And it makes you wonder like how much Nick Saban is consuming all that fatal rat poison, right? Kind of consuming it and sponging it up so his players don't have to. And then obviously you get a response like that. I love it. Good question, Mike. I'm glad you brought that because I'm imagine that quote will be memed for quite some time. I think probably some good memes and t-shirts coming out of that. So good stuff, Mike. We appreciate it. Of course, looking forward to covering this for the next like you said, month or so. Looking forward to that matchup. So again, it'll be Alabama. They will face number 4 Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl December 31st. It'll be Michigan and Georgia on December 31st as well in the Orange Bowl. And then the national championship will be played on January 10th. So we'll have all that coverage for you guys throughout for the coming days and weeks. And again, appreciate your insight. Y'all take a breather, rest a minute, and then, we'll have some football. We'll have some football fun here in a few weeks for you. Okay? Peace out.